You're welcome. You're welcome. As I have already said in my introduction, that I start my lessons from known to unknown. And here also I'll be starting from what is known to you and what is not known to you. Now I have written what is known to you in green, what is not known to you in black, and what is scientific facts, new things, I have tried to write that in red. Now, as you know, we have started with biology, and I have already given you characteristic features of living things. And in living things is animals and plants. We'll be starting with animals first. And among animals, I'm sure human being is the one with which you are familiar. So I'm starting with human biology, with which you are quite familiar. Now, in human biology again, what is most common is the food. That's what we eat, or what we call in our biology or human biology as the digestive system. Now, if I start with digestive system, all those organs which help in the process of digestion constitute what is called as digestive system. So here is a list of the organs of digestion. Now the question here comes is, what is digestion? The answer is converting insoluble constituents of food into their soluble form is digestion. Now, what is food? I know if I asked you what is food, you will say that anything that we eat may be called as food. But anything that we eat and is useful for our body will be designated as food. So what we eat has to be useful. Then two questions come. What is food and what are its uses? Now, what is food, or what are the constituents of food which needs to be digested? Here is the constituents of food. After that, we'll see what are the uses of the food. Constituents of food are carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals, water, and fiber. Now, carbohydrates, as the name indicates, are the compounds of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, in which the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen are present in the ratio of 1:2:1. I mean carbon 1, hydrogen 2, and oxygen 1. Now these carbohydrates are of three main types. Monosaccharides, I have written M, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Monosaccharides are glucose, disaccharides is sugar that we eat, polysaccharide is starch. Monosaccharides, I mean glucose, is soluble in water, and we want everything to be converted into glucose. Disaccharides are also soluble in water, but they have to be brought back to glucose. And polysaccharides are multiple molecules of glucose, so they have to be brought back to glucose. Then proteins are compounds of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen and nitrogen. And proteins are of two types: animal proteins and plant proteins. Animal proteins that come from animals, like milk, the egg, the meat. Plant proteins are which come from plants, like all the beans, all the other things like pulses. These are what? The sources of protein. Now, after that comes the fat. Fats are also compounds of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen, but carbon and hydrogen and oxygen are not present as 1:1, 1:2:1 as in carbohydrates. Fats are also of two types coming from animals and plants. From animals, like we get butter or cod liver oil or fish oil or any other oil. And the plant oil is the oil that come from sunflower, groundnuts, all vegetable oils. Next is vitamins. Vitamins are of five types: A, B, C, D, E and K. I have written them A, D, E and K because they are fat soluble. Vitamin B and C are water soluble. Now, minerals are almost all soluble. Water is a solvent itself. Fiber is not soluble, but it is made soluble, or it remains like that. It helps the food to move forward. Now, what are the uses of these components of food? The uses of food. The carbohydrates are responsible for giving us energy. Proteins are responsible for giving growth and repair and making the different enzymes that we need. Fats are also responsible for building the cell walls, and they are also involved in the process of growth. Vitamins are involved in growth and bodybuilding. Minerals are involved in building and repair. Water is solvent. So, the food which has these 6 or 7 constituents has to give us 3 things: energy, growth and repair, and formation of some other chemical substances that we need in our body. So anything that we eat must have one of these and must contribute to the usage of it. If it is not useful, I'm afraid it cannot be called as food biologically, otherwise maybe. Now, next comes, after having seen food and constituents of food, we see the organs of digestion. The organs which do this job, converting insoluble constituents into their soluble form. Here are those. Now, looking at these organs, the first organ is the mouth. The opening between the 2 lips is the mouth, and the cavity in which this mouth opens is called the buccal cavity. Buccal cavity opens into a space called pharynx, or you call it as throat. Now I have brought this pharynx here. This is the buccal cavity opening into it. From above, there are 2 tubes coming from the nose, from the olfactory tubes, or the the nares, and this opening is internal nares in the pharynx. Then two tubes come from two ears. They are called eustachian tubes. In between these two tubes, there's a piece of flesh which hangs from above the throat. You can see if you open your mouth. This is called ovula. The function of ovula is that it does not let the things pass from here into the olfactory sac or into the eustachian tube. It only permits the air to come in and air to here. Nothing goes from here up there. So you can say it acts as a valve. Now, the other thing is towards the lower side of the throat, we have two tubes, the esophagus, the food pipe, and the windpipe. These two pipes are separated by a structure called epiglottis. Now, epiglottis is a bridge which does not let the food particles to get into the trachea. Food goes into the esophagus only. When the food is pushed from the pharynx into the esophagus, this is raised upwards, making a bridge over the windpipe. So the food slips over and comes into the esophagus. So that's the function of the epiglottis. In the mouth, there are three pairs of salivary glands. I'll come to these salivary glands at the end. And in the mouth, we have the tongue and the teeth and the upper palatine. Now, the esophagus is a long tube around 14 inches in length, of course, depending upon the height of the individual. This esophagus opens into a bag-like structure called the stomach. This stomach, this upper portion of the stomach which is towards the heart is called cardiac stomach. The portion which is towards the liver is called pyloric stomach. The opening of the esophagus into the stomach is guarded by a sphincter muscle which opens like this, permits the food to come from here into the stomach and does not let the food go from the stomach up to the esophagus. Similarly, the opening of the stomach into the duodenum is also guarded by a sphincter muscle which does not let the food, it lets the food come from the stomach into the duodenum, but it does not let the food go back from the duodenum into the intestine. You have to remember this. Now, after the duodenum, which is a C-shaped tube, there comes the small intestines. This all zigzag tube is the small intestine, which actually fills up the abdomen. This abdominal portion contains the small intestines. The small intestines then opens into large intestine, which is also called colon. The point where small intestine meets the large intestine, I mean the colon, there is a bag-like structure called the cecum. Towards the lower side of the cecum, there is a worm-like structure hanging downwards, is called vermiform appendix. And by the way, I'll tell later that vermiform appendix is not functional in human beings. Now, the large intestine or the colon goes around the small intestine like this. This is called ascending portion of the colon, the horizontal portion of the colon, and the descending portion of the colon. As it goes there, it turns around and is called sigmoid colon because it is almost a sigma-like. The colon then opens into a bag-like structure called rectum, where the undigested food is stored, and the rectum opens to the outside through a hole called anus, and the small canal coming from the rectum up to the anus is called anal canal. Now, these are the organs of digestive system. There are a few other organs which are associated with the process of digestion. Those are, as I have already said, 3 pairs of salivary glands. The one present on the upper side below the ear is called a parotid salivary gland, one on each side, and then we have submandibular present below the lower jaw, submandibular, and sublingual below the tongue. So the first associated gland with digestive system is 3 pairs of salivary glands. The second one is the liver, the largest organ in our body, liver, which is present, is almost a triangle shaped, but present in the form of a lobe around the duodenum and the stomach. In the liver, there is a structure called gallbladder, which stores the juice that comes from the liver, the bile juice, and this gallbladder opens into the duodenum. So, second associated organ is liver. The third is pancreas. The pancreas is present in between the stomach, the colon, and the duodenum. So these are 3 structures which are associated with the digestive system. I repeat, salivary glands, liver, and pancreas. Now, next comes how all these organs do this job of converting insoluble constituents of the food into their soluble form. How does it happen? That is called mechanism of digestion. Now, to explain mechanism of digestion, the food that we eat, there are 2 things. One, this food has to be broken into smaller pieces. And this is done, that is called mechanical digestion. The mechanical digestion is done, breaking up of the food into smaller pieces is so that chemical digestion can take place. That is, the chemicals that come out can react on the food. What I mean is, if you have eaten a piece of bread, if the digestive juices come here, then this is the surface area which is being reacted by the digestive enzymes. But if it is broken into pieces, then each portion is reacted by the digestive enzymes. So by mechanical digestion, we break up the food particle into smaller pieces, and the aim is to increase the surface area for the digestive juices to react. Now, how this mechanical digestion takes place? Number 1, as this mechanical digestion takes place, the food has to move from the mouth through the esophagus, stomach, and all that to up to it has to move. Because it has to move, the first thing that happens in mechanical digestion is that food is made slippery. And it is made slippery right from the buccal cavity up to throughout the tube. The mucus is secreted, which makes the food slippery so that it can move forward. The second is that in the mouth, there are teeth and the tongue. The food is masticated in the mouth. And you know, we masticate the food and it is broken up into smaller pieces. Now, the interesting thing is the digestion starts in the mouth. As the food is put into the buccal cavity, the teeth masticated, saliva is mixed into the food, and saliva has an enzyme called tyalin. This tyalin is an enzyme which can convert carbohydrates into glucose. It's interesting. If you take a piece of bread and put it into your mouth and chew it, as you are chewing, it will taste tasteless or no taste. But if you keep chewing, it will become sort of liquid and a paste. And if you are careful, you will see that it starts tasting sweet. What has happened? Carbohydrates are converted into glucose. So that sweet taste is because of glucose. You can try this. An interesting experiment. Now this food, which has been masticated and mixed up with saliva, is pushed from the buccal cavity into the pharynx, through the pharynx into the gullet. Of course, in the mouth, on the tongue, we have some taste buds which can taste the food, different tastes like sweet, sour, saltish, and so on. Once the food is pushed from the mouth cavity or buccal cavity into the pharynx, you have no control, no control of the food. Interesting. Then food moves on its own. That movement of the food on its own is by the process of muscles present in the alimentary canal called peristalsis. Now, peristalsis is, by the way, this is the transverse section of the tube, general, the whole tube. The outer layer is called the epithelium, and then we have the circular-like muscles or circular muscles, and then longitudinal muscles. These are two layers of muscles in the tube. And then we have inside the endothelium. And the space of the tube is called the lumen. In the endothelium, the inner wall is thrown into finger-like projections in the intestines and almost everywhere, and those that is called villi. Singular is villus. Now, what here why I have brought it here is that these muscles contract and relax. When circular muscles relax, the tube opens, and the longitudinal muscles contract, and the length decreases, thus making a movement like this. The closing, when this closes, the food is pushed down, then this closes and it opens like this. Squeezing activity is brought about by the contraction and relaxation of circular and longitudinal muscles right from the pharynx up to the rectum almost. And this movement, peristalsis, is called peristalsis. It makes the food move from the pharynx almost up to the rectum and anus. Now, when the food comes in the stomach, in stomach also peristalsis takes place, and it pushes the food through this valve into the duodenum and so on. The food, as it comes into the stomach, it also breaks up the food into smaller particles. I mean, mechanical digestion takes place in the stomach also. And that is done by churning. Now, mastication, I hope you understand, that's what we do in the mouth. Churning is that the stomach makes the movements like this. In the stomach, there are ridges, and those ridges churn the food and mix the food in the saliva which was there, and also a juice from the stomach called gastric juice. Now, the gastric juice, in addition to what? A mechanical digestion, there's chemical digestion also in the stomach. The gastric juice has hydrochloric acid and then pepsin, which turns proteins into peptones, and there is another enzyme called renin, which is generally present in the babies, where it curdles milk, where the main food is milk, and it helps in digesting the milk. As the babies grow up, probably they don't drink much of milk, so the renin is not secreted by the stomach. The hydrochloric acid makes the food acidic in medium, and also it kills all the germs and bacteria which may be present in the food. Hence, this food is sterilized in the stomach. And this food, which is digested mechanically and chemically in the stomach, this food is now called chyme, C-H-Y-M-E. With the peristalsis of the stomach, this food is then pushed into the duodenum. In the duodenum, a juice comes from the liver called bile juice. A juice comes from the pancreas called pancreatic juice. Now, this is the bile duct in the liver. In the bile juice comes also in the gallbladder and is stored in the gallbladder. When food comes in the duodenum, this will be pumped through the bile duct and the pancreatic duct from the pancreas. They join together and form a common bile duct called a CBD. This common bile duct then opens into the duodenum. So, two juices come and meet the food. One is the bile and the other is the pancreatic juice. Now, the bile has pigments, bile juice is concerned with the digestion. Bile digests the fat, and pancreatic juice has three enzymes: the trypsin, which will turn proteins into peptones and peptones into amino acids, and it has amylopsin, which will convert starch, polysaccharides, disaccharides into glucose, and lipolytic enzymes, which will digest fat into fatty acids and glycerine. Now, this process of digestion has started right here, and it is quite fast. Now, as the food gets into the small intestine, the upper half of the small intestine is more digestive in function and secretes a juice which is called intestinal juice. And this intestinal juice also has enzymes which will convert all the proteins and peptones into completely amino acids, all the carbohydrates into glucose, and all the fat into fatty acids and glycerol. Now, I have to tell you one thing, that as I'm saying this is more digestive in function, it can absorb also to some extent, though the second half of the small intestine is more absorptive in function and less digestive in function. Similarly, in the stomach also, some of the absorption takes place in the stomach, some of the absorption takes place in the mouth. Not everything, but generally alcohol and some of the glucose is absorbed in the mouth. And alcohol is absorbed more in the stomach. And once this alcohol goes beyond, probably it's not much absorbed. It passes out as undigested food. The main absorption takes place in the upper half of the small intestine. The lower half also does this job. Now the food, as it passes through being treated with the digestive juices, passes from small intestines into the large intestine. This portion it keeps on moving, peristalsis. It takes a little time for the food to move like this. And in the colon, large intestine, in all this portion, the water is absorbed in such a way that any traces of digested food which have escaped absorption in the intestines is absorbed here along with the water. And the food that comes in the rectum is undigested food and has least water. Generally, it is a semi-solid or solid. Now, I have to tell you one thing here. As the small intestine joins the large intestine, this structure is called cecum. And cecum has a finger-like attachment towards the slower side called the vermiform appendix. Here, a miraculous nature's miracle. This vermiform appendix is not functional. Even if the food is kept here for some time, no digestion takes place here. Vermiform doesn't help in any type of digestion. But what is interesting here, that in all other animals except human being, all so-called herbivores, this is functional and it is bigger, it's quite long. And it secretes enzyme which can digest the cellulose. The plants, the grass and leaves. Hence, these animals do not die of hunger because there's plenty grass, plenty leaves. They eat it and this part digests it and it converts the cellulose is a polysaccharide. It converts it into glucose and the animals survive. Now what is interesting here is the vermiform appendix is present but not functional. This is what I say is miraculous effect of nature. Had it been functioning, then we would also eating these grass and these leaves. There should have been no food problem. Because this is not functional, there is a food problem, and we work to earn money, and we buy food like this with that money, and the whole life is. Some people at some stage or the other, they wanted to make this vermiform appendix functional in case of human being to solve food problem, but could not do it. It's very difficult to overcome nature's decisions, as we call. This is probably, let's say it's God who has done this, and you cannot do it. It cannot be changed, though a lot of job has been done, changing it into functional form, failed. Right. The digested food that comes in the rectum, it is stored in the rectum. And last traces of water are completely absorbed. And this is called undigested food. This is that part of the food which has escaped digestion and has come into the rectum. Now, I have said that fiber is the function, is the material which makes the food move from one place to another. It helps in the process of peristalsis. This fiber, if it is not soluble, it is changed into soluble form, and it helps the food to move on. Therefore, generally they say that whenever you eat food, there must be some fiber. Now, another interesting thing. As I told you, that the muscles in the buccal cavity are under your control. You can throw the food back, you can push the food in. But once you have pushed the food in, from throat onwards, these muscles are not under your control. But these muscles are working, peristalsis. Then the question comes, who is making this peristaltic movement? The answer is, it is controlled by a part of your brain, and that part of the brain is not under your control. I am making a sentence. A part of our brain controls the peristaltic movement of the whole alimentary canal. That a part of our brain is not under our control. Then the question is under whose control? Interesting. That part of the brain is under the control of our brain, one part of our brain, and that part of our brain is not under our control. And that part of the brain is under the control of nature, God. Now, no muscles are under your control. You cannot tell the food here to go up, here, and so on. The muscles of the rectum are again partially under your control. You can hold the undigested food into your rectum for some time, and when you feel like throwing it out, you can open those. There's a sphincter here also. You will let that sphincter open and throw the undigested food to the outside. Now that finishes the process of digestion, I mean the mechanical and the chemical digestion, and the digestive system. That's all for today. Thank you.